So far, I would say I think I only have one on your list that I would say definitely deserves a top seven. But regardless, I'm not judging. Okay, just because you're not a sports guy doesn't mean that you can't have opinions. All right. So we'll go to my top three now. Now, my number three is Remember the Titans, and this was one I think probably the most popular one from our fans on Facebook. I know, you know, a couple of my friends, Jared Joyner, Ashley Bowden, Robin Oler, Peter Brazier, a bunch of guys, all said this movie, and I agree. This is probably, in my mind, for my money, best football movie of all time. It's made by Disney. Good family movie. This is
Based on a true story, right?
based on a true story, and it has Denzel Washington in it as the main coach. And this is based in a situation in Virginia at the time of integration. They decide that the school board decides to integrate an all-white and all-black school, and the football programs mesh. The two schools integrate. Denzel Washington, who plays Coach Boone, and Bill Patton, who plays Coach Yost, kind of work together. Coach Yost is ousted as head coach, even though he's kind of a Hall of Fame coach, or at least destined to be a Hall of Fame coach, and has a great pedigree, and nobody really knows who Coach Boone is. And Coach Boone brings him in as the defensive coach to kind of meld this team together. And the whole movie is about these teams coming together as one and playing as a true football team. And there's so many great lessons to be taught in this movie. There's some really funny stuff. There's Ryan Gosling early in his career, and Hayden Panettiere, who, if I'm saying that right, I can never get it right, but pre-Cheerleader and Heroes, as a young girl, both in this movie, and do a fantastic job in their roles. This is a little bit of story from my life. This is the first movie I watched at the end of my mission. We went to the mission home, and the mission president allowed us to watch a movie, and this was the first movie we watched, and it was just absolutely fantastic. All my kids have watched it and love it. It's a great opportunity to talk about race as well. This is a big issue in politics now. This is a great way to teach tolerance and interconnectedness, and the way that they come together and the way that the coaches help them to come together are just really well told. And like I said, it's based on a true story, which is always fun as well. What do you think of Remember the Titans?
I love it. The only time I ever saw that was in the mission home. They let us watch that on the way out, or last night before we got on the plane the next day. That's the time I saw it, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't seen it since then. I do own it, but I just haven't had a chance to watch it, and probably just because it's not on the top of my list for entertainment. I think that's what I'm seeing is the difference between my list and your list is, since I'm not a huge sports fan, I'm looking at movies as what's enjoyable for me in watching sports movies as far as cinematic narrative, versus where you're watching for lessons and aspects that you get out of real life sports, because you're an athlete and do a lot more of that. So I think that's why, and I mean, there's a lot of ethics and a lot of things in that movie that have nothing to do with the sports as well. It's a great movie, but if I was doing as a list of my favorite movies, well, so that's it. If I was reviewing as a movie, it would score very, very high, but just not on the top or the front of my mind when I think about it. I considered it, but I didn't put it on my list because it's just not one of the overwhelming, fulfilling movies for me. One of the overwhelming movies for me as far as entertainment value. It's a really entertaining movie, really good. Think about it. Like you said, it has a lot of things that should be discussed that belong in a movie. And it's a good watch. I love it, but that's the difference in just what we're looking for. That's all.
Yeah. So, and another thing that I look for in these movies is I find that you can teach a lot of life lessons through sports, and there's a lot of life lessons to be learned in movies like Hoosiers and Remember the Titans. So, like I said, Remember the Titans. I think anybody who doesn't put this on their list of top 10s or 20s or even top 5s, I mean, it's just a fantastic movie. It's a good family movie. Anybody can watch it. I would say I'd be comfortable telling anyone that their kids could watch it as well. So, great movie. Now, number 2. The Karate Kid. So I would say this is the Karate Kid series is probably my second favorite series of all time. I love that movie. I love the story of Daniel LaRusso coming over from New Jersey, not having any friends, and immediately running into these rich Cobra Kais who are just bullying him and treating him like dirt because he has a love interest with one of their ex-girlfriends, and the befriending of Mr. Miyagi and passing on a family legacy to him because he doesn't have children of his own, and kind of befriending him and almost becoming a father figure to a guy who doesn't have a father, who's in a single parent home, is just a really touching story. And it's got exactly what you're talking about, overcoming adversity, overcoming problems in your life, your own self-confidence issues, particularly when it came to, the story between him and Ali is really more about his self-confidence than anything, and that he comes from, what would be considered a low-income family, and he is falling for a girl who's kind of in the upper class and belongs to a country club, and she doesn't care about it, but he does, and him having to get over that and understand that it's not all about that, and she loves him truly for who he is. That's another great part of the story. And I also just, some of the great lines that the Cobra Kais are just so great. Billy Zabka does a great job as Johnny Lawrence. John Kreese is a great villain. I can totally see him being a villainous karate dojo master. And the other thing that I think is great about this is there's a lesson there about people who you perceive as villains. When Mr. Miyagi says stuff like, there is no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher. And understanding that these kids are impressionable and they're not bad kids. They just have been taught wrong. And you can see throughout the movie, and one thing that I'll kind of share here that I've learned over the years is there's a movie, I wish they would have kept it in the movie, but there's a scene that they cut out of the movie between Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso where they kind of have this fight at school, and Daniel looks at him and says, "You ever think that have you ever thought that maybe your sensei is wrong?" And that begins the process of Billy Zabka, Johnny Lawrence, kind of realizing that maybe what he's been taught is not okay. And you see that throughout the end of the tournament when they all go to the All Valley Under 18 karate tournament, and you can see that all of these guys, particularly starting with Bobby and then later going on into Johnny, you see that they're realizing that what they've been taught is actually not accurate, and it ends ultimately with him handing the trophy over to Daniel LaRusso. So fantastic movie, one of my favorites. Like I said, Mr. Miyagi is the most iconic mentor of all time. I love all the movies except for The Next Karate Kid with Hilary Swank, but that's another conversation for another day. My wife didn't let me, but when I bought the whole series, it came with it, and I wanted to break the disc because I think it's just a complete abomination, even more so than Jaden Smith. But love those movies, and The Karate Kid, like I said, is one that I probably watch at least once a month. When my kids are sick, we watch The Karate Kid. So
nice. I love it. There's not much else to say about it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if the background doesn't tell you what my number one is, my number one is Rocky. I actually thought about maybe making my top 7 Creed, Rocky Balboa, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, but I thought that'd be unfair. And so I'm just going to say the Rocky series in it as a whole, but particularly the first one, is my favorite sports movie of all time. Everybody knows the story. I don't know how you can call yourself an American if you haven't seen them, particularly Rocky IV, where Sylvester Stallone fights communism. Ronald Reagan should thank him. So Rocky is by far my favorite movie of all time. I think Sylvester Stallone, he'll forever be identified as Rocky in my heart, and I'm sure in the hearts of everybody, even though he's played other iconic characters. It's the ultimate 1,000,000-to-1 shot movie. It's the ultimate overcoming obstacles movie. It's the ultimate failure movie. The reason I like the first one, you've asked me before, why is it that everybody seems to put the first one as the best of all the Rockies? And I think the reason for that is strictly because it's not about winning. It's about him just proving to himself that my favorite line in the movie is, "I'll know for the first time in my life that I weren't just another bum from the neighborhood." And that's what it's all about for him. He's a down on your luck, never was. He's not even a has-been. He was a never was, never had a shot. And he finally gets a shot. Apollo Creed gives him this opportunity to stand in the ring with him and kind of face his demons and face the best. And I'm sure we'll have a conversation about all of the Rocky movies at some point, but you learn that all he really wanted was to be able to stand in there with the best and prove he could do it. and he does that even though he loses the final fight. So that's my number one. What do you think?
Rocky. I'm not surprised at all. That's what I was expecting. I'm not going to argue or dispute it.
Good.
My number three.
You don't want that fight.
No, there's nothing wrong with it. That will be a very thorough. And as far as I'm concerned, I love all the Rocky movies. There's no right or wrong with what people's favorites are. I think what people get out of the movies is different. I don't disagree with anything you just said. I agree that's the magic of the first one. It does set the story and the tone for all the amazing things that happen in the rest of the movies. And as a sports movie, one of the reasons I didn't like it as much as the others growing up was it felt like it didn't have a lot of action. It was a lot more drama. I mean, he has the one small fight in the very beginning, and then he has all this stuff going on in his life, and then he finally gets a shot. Even though there's a couple scenes in mixed what's it called, the gym, and he has a couple of scenes in there, but he's not doing a lot of boxing stuff and not a whole lot of training stuff for a majority of the movie. So mostly for me, it was just a pacing thing. It's a good movie. There's a lot of stuff going on with Adrian and things going on with Mick and Polly, and it's all good stuff. But to me, it's just the plot that sets off the rest of the series. To me, it's not my favorite sports movie. I love it. A great fight. Yeah, it does have a good montage at the end that kicks off the definition of a training montage was from that movie. But my number three is Rocky 3. So,
okay.
So Rocky 3. This is what I love about Rocky 3. And again, this totally just pulls out exactly what we've already said. I'm looking for overall enjoyable entertainment for the whole experience of the movie. If you're looking at colorful characters and the ups and downs and the big rally moment and the mentoring and all that stuff, it's all in Rocky 3. More than the other movies. There's a lot more patriotism in Rocky 4. There's a lot of cool stuff in the relationship and what Rocky's trying to accomplish in Rocky 2 versus the first one. I love the idea in the first one where he's trying to get his shot for the first time and he's trying to actually become someone. That's all valid and awesome. And there's a lot of cool stuff. Even though a lot of people don't like the fifth one, I love the fifth one. There's a lot of his dealing with what he is without all the wealth and fame and everything, going back to what he's, after everything's been stripped away, what does he have left and what are his actual values and him trying to sort that out. There's a lot of really cool stuff about all the movies, but Rocky 3 has the most action. You have the recap of the fight from Rocky 2. You have the first fight with Clubber Lang and the montage with him fighting a bunch of people, maintaining his title. And then you have his defeat with Clubber Lang, and then you have his rematch with Clubber Lang, and you also have Thunderlips in there. So you have Hulk Hogan in there fighting Sylvester Stallone. I mean, there's like 5 fights right there. And then you have 3 training sequences. You have the first training sequence before the first fight, where he gets his butt kicked, and that's really light. And then you have a second training sequence, which I say is the one before the beach, and then you have the final one. Now, if you remember, Josh, on my mission, when I gave a 25-minute, you'd have to call it a lecture on Rocky and how the mission applies to the Rocky movies, or how the Rocky movies could apply to a mission. It was 1 through 3. I didn't go on. I could have, but the lecture was building all of that up to that moment on the beach. That moment on the beach to me with Adrian when he's trying to race he's trying to race Apollo Creed, and he's just burnt, and he's ready to give it all up, and he doesn't have the drive. Mickey's died, and he's spoilers, I guess, but Mickey's died.
A little bit at this point.
But Mickey died, and he's trying to rally. He's trying to get back. He's trying to defend his title that he felt was fake because he needed to prove to himself by fighting Clubber Lang, a real opponent, versus the ones that Mick had kind of set up to retain his title, but he was keeping him safe, and there's reasons he did that. But that moment with Adrian on the beach where she was trying to pull out of him what his problem was, why he was really afraid, and his coming to grips and admitting to himself and to her why he was afraid is what really spells out what the whole series is about. I mean, and that's what the point was on the mission. If you really pull out, why you're afraid, there's nothing left. You can't have faith. You can't have optimism. You can't have good expectations if you have any fear. And all she said was like, it's okay if you're afraid. It's okay if you want to give up, but you have to do it for the right reason. And she just needed him to admit what that was. And when he got out of it, that he was afraid of losing what he's got. And she's like, what are you going to lose? You still have me. You still have you. You still have the kid. When we're all here, you're not going to lose anything. And that was what the message was on the mission, is like, what are we afraid to open our mouths for and all that? But taking it back into the sports aspect of it, it's just got everything that's enjoyable. It's got good humor. It's got good characters. It's got good rivalries. It has relationships from the previous two movies and stuff that springs into the next couple movies. And it's just fantastic. And no one can argue that that's not one of the most enjoyable to watch, entertaining sports movies, especially if you're looking at it as, the training montages and the fight sequences and things like that. It's not my favorite boxing fight in the Rocky movies, and it's not the best training sequence in the Rocky movies, but as a well-rounded movie, it has a little bit of the best of everything.
So I would say that Rocky 3 is the first of the Rocky series I can remember watching as a kid. And I think Rocky 3 is the reason, as a kid, I initially fell in love with the series, that was the movie that spearheaded me in going back and watching 1 and 2, and then eventually seeing 4 and the rest, and falling in love with the whole series. But the reason I don't, and also, by the way, any movie with Hulk Hogan in it is immediately awesome. So, and Mr. T, who, by the way, both headlined the first WrestleMania, which is another story. And anyway, but Rocky 1, the reason everything that you said, you're right. Everything that you said in Rocky 3 about him being afraid, it all goes back to the initial reason he even took the fight with Creed, and the initial reason why he wanted that fight, even though he thought there was no chance that he could actually win. It's all about wanting to know that he wasn't another bum from the neighborhood. And Rocky 3 is just a continuation of that, because in Rocky 2, Rocky 2 is about him finally winning, that realizing that he could actually go toe-to-toe with the best and beat him. And Rocky 3 is about him realizing that everything after he beats Apollo Creed is just, it's all been kind of set up for Mickey to protect him so that he could continue defending his title. And he realized when he beat a true opponent, or when he fought a true opponent like Clubber Lang, that maybe he wasn't as good as he thought he was. So I agree, it's a great movie, but it all goes back to that initial premise, and I don't think that third movie plays as well as the first. And also, I disagree with you about that fight on the beach. I think that is the worst of their fights, between Rocky and Adrian, because that's the first one where it's the only one in the whole series where she actually is encouraging him to go and fight, which I hate, because she's always the anti. She's always the one that is the wife who would legitimately, she doesn't care about the money. She doesn't care about the wealth. She doesn't care about any of that stuff. All she wants is to be with Rocky. And she just doesn't want him to fight because she's afraid he's going to get his head kicked in. It makes no sense at all why Adrian, after actually seeing him get his head kicked in, would actually want him to go and fight this guy who destroyed him completely, and seeing that his head's not even the right place to go and train him.
And see, that's the brilliance of it. And she even says, when this is all over, all there is us, and I need you to to be who you are. You get out of this what you need to. And I can't remember the exact line, but that's her whole point, is she knows that she's not going to talk him out of fighting, and she's not trying to. And even though he's ready to quit, she needs him to quit. If he doesn't want to fight, then great, but he has to do it for the right reasons. And she knows that he is not going to feel complete or that he's going to feel fulfilled or really understand who he is without going through with it, or at least resolve or quitting for the right reason, or at least for admitting to himself why he's quitting. If he can deal with that, great. But she's like, you can't come back without being ready to, or being, I can't think of the word, but that's the whole point of the beach. But that's a whole other conversation. It has nothing to do with the sports movie. And I agree with you that this movie is not as good without the depth that came from the first one. In fact, Clubber Lang even says, you had your shot, why don't I get a shot? And that was the whole point of the first movie, was that nobody had a shot from the streets, and Apollo underestimated what Rocky could do, and now Rocky's the champion. He was like, I'll take the guy, whatever. And then he realized that he very much underestimated Mr. T, and he wasn't taking his training seriously and all that. I agree that there's a lot of foreshadowing that's necessary in the first movie. I just enjoy this one a lot better.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable movie. One other thing I'd point out about Rocky 3 as to why I don't think it deserves to be the best of the Rocky series, and why I kind of struggle between that and Rocky 4 as kind of one of my second favorite, or maybe my third favorite after Rocky Balboa, is that Mr. Clubber Lang is kind of an incomplete villain for me. He's not even really a villain. He's just another hungry fighter who is trying to get his shot. He's not a bad guy. I mean, he looks like a bad guy and he acts like a bad guy, but he's not a bad guy. He's a tough guy. And so, it's not like Ivan Drago, who is a villain, who's been trained to be a villain and, is the embodiment of everything anti-Americana of the time of the early 90s when this movie came out. He embodies just another hungry fighter who's very much like Rocky, only with a lot more drive than Rocky had before he got his shot. So, take what it is, but hey, it's your list, so what am I going to say?
That's true. It is my list, and thanks for acknowledging that. Okay, my number 2, and this one came up a lot on Facebook, and that's not what swayed me. This has always been one of my all-time favorite sports movies. On the Facebook page, a lot of people said The Mighty Ducks 2, and yes, Mighty Ducks 2 is way better than the first one. I enjoy the first one a lot, but the second one, they retained the best of the characters from the first one of those kids, and then they brought in new characters that completely added to the dynamics of the team, and I love it. That movie has everything. It has great music. It has great characters. It has a lot of fun. It has all the little quirks and the little tricks and abilities of each of the kids that are all unique, and it helps them to harness them and overcome their own difficulties and their own issues with each other, and to get all on board as a team and to take the championship. And this is the world championship in the Olympics, and that's what's cool about it. Is, like I said, one of the things I look for is that whole underdog thing, and the zero to hero. Yeah, they were winners in the first one, but it was just some state league. It wasn't like taking on the best of the whole world. And when they thought they were the best of the best of the best because they won their little Pee-wee championship, when they get put up against some of the actual best in the world, they do have their victories right up front, but as soon as they play Iceland, the serious team, they get thrown around and they're almost out for elimination right off the bat. So they deal with that, and meanwhile you have Coach Bombay, played by Emilio Estevez, fantastic character. I wouldn't say like the greatest acting ever or anything like that, but he's a fun, amazing character, and he has to overcome his own being his being spoiled with all the money and the fame and all the press and everything, and his being really cushy and being driven out of what the spirit of the team was in the first one. And it had nothing to do with hockey, it had nothing to do with the teamwork or anything, had nothing to do with the Ducks spirit. Now it was just all about the sponsors and the competition and what they had to do with him as a profession. And it changed who he was, and he had to overcome that. Fun movie, great jokes, great characters, and I don't get enough of it. I watched that movie probably 50 times every year as a kid. Not really 50 times, but I watched it quite a bit. What'd you think of Mighty Ducks 2? I'm sure it's not I know it's not on your list, but what did you think?
I like the first Mighty Ducks better personally. I think that the reason I do is because I think that everybody's story is a little bit more deep than just wanting to go and win another championship. There was a lot more going on there between Charlie and wanting a father figure. There's the, Gordon Bombay and him having to overcome his own selfishness, the interplay between him and his former coach. All of the characters have something that they're dealing with. The goalie who is afraid of getting hit with the puck and things of that nature. Those are all stories that I really enjoyed more than the second one, where I felt like the second one was kind of almost just the first movie again with a little bit higher stakes. So, but both of them are entertaining. My kids have watched both of them and liked both of them. Anytime they're on Netflix, we'll watch them again. I don't think I own either one of them. I should probably remedy that. But I actually considered Mighty Ducks for the possibility of putting it on my list, but I just thought there were too many movies ahead of it. So
that's nothing wrong with that. I think if nothing else, we can at least agree that the third one sucked.
yes, agreed. Yes.
All right. Okay, so you like the first one, I like the second one. Okay, my number one favorite sports movie. And let me just say before I do announce what it is, I don't watch it very often, and I don't even own it. I need to remedy that, but it's A League of Their Own. I know it was on your list, but the reason I absolutely love A League of Their Own is just all of the emotion and all of the real life drama and the feelings and the problems that they all face that are things that are so distant from our society today, that having a women's baseball league and things going on with women home while the men are away at war and all that stuff is stuff that a lot of people in our generation, the recent generations, they don't relate to the same. Where it's just women are liberated and everything's equal. And I think some of the emotion that in some ways has been lost or forgotten in history is totally captured in that movie. And it also has everything else I love. All of the characters, all the women are all different, and you mentioned them all already, but the biggest thing is with Gina Davis and her sister. That's the cool part, is the twist in this one is that, they're on the Peaches, the Peach team. Peaches or Peach?
They were the Peach. Yeah, they were Rockford Peach.
Yeah. So, and then they're playing against the other team from New York. Is that right? If I remember correctly.
They were from Racine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you have Gina Davis, and towards the end, her sister gets traded, and there's the whole rivalry where again they don't win. And that's like I said in the beginning, that's not what it takes to make a good sports movie. Your heroes don't have to win. Is that they accomplished things. They did things for women's rights. They did, or not women's rights, but they did things for the morale of the country, and they helped stimulate and bring back ambition and interest in sports while all the men were away fighting in the war. And the emotional scenes with Gina Davis and her sister, the relationship they had, that her sister had to overcome her feeling that she was always under the wing and under the shadow of Gina Davis. And that was why she even got into the league in the first place, was because when John Lovitz came in, hilarious character, by the way, when he came in to draft them and to sign them, that Gina Davis would only come if her sister came as well for the tryouts. All of it is just magical, and I cannot finish that movie without being in tears. And the emotion, the heat, the music, and everything in the last fight, or the last game, where Gina Davis has to try to beat her sister when she comes in for the final run and scores the last point. And she's just so happy and relieved that she won, even though she lost the game, that her sister was triumphant, seeing all that happiness. She didn't need all that. And it's just magical. And then when they go back and, like you said, they saw themselves in the Hall of Fame and everything, and some of them had passed away, including, Tom Hanks' character. It's just very emotional. And then you show the girls playing, the old women playing baseball just at the local field. And then This Used to Be My Playground by Madonna starts playing, and it just yanks your heart. But it has everything, the dynamics of baseball, fun characters, and just a lot of emotion that's real, that is forgotten, I think. And I think it's underappreciated, even, I would say. But a lot of people put it on their picks as well on the Facebook page. But it's my number one favorite movie, well-rounded with drama and entertainment and fun, comedy, action. It's exciting.
You're talking about the emotions, and I share also in my review of The Greatest Showman. It's very rare for me. I tend to be, my wife would say I'm a little closed off emotionally, and so it's very rare for me to go into I go into comedies and I laugh. And I might go into a sad story and I might get sad, a love story, and I might feel warm fuzzies. It's very rare that I go into a movie and I feel a whole range of emotions. But I can think of specific scenes in that movie where I feel everything. There are parts where I laugh. The scene that I mentioned earlier with Tom Hanks, saying there's no crying in baseball, and then getting thrown out of the game because he's so mad and he yells at the umpire. The scene where Betty Spaghetti realizes that her husband died in war, and how that affected Gina Davis's character because she hadn't heard from her husband in 3 weeks. And that whole scene was so emotional, and they really captured it so well. I mean, you could almost see when the guy walked in with the letter, I felt like, oh man, I just hope, oh, that sucks. You know what I mean? It's just so terrible. And when she just bursts into tears afterwards, it's just so emotional, and then when Kit finally overcomes her sister and beats her sister, even though her sister was not, Gina Davis's character was not taking it easy on her. She went out to the pitcher and said, she likes the high ones, can't hit them, can't lay off them. And she was able to hit the high one and, make it in the most improbable way by an inside the field home run and beating her sister. You can't get any better than that. So I agree. Definitely something that deserves to be in the top 7. I don't know if I would call it my top. I didn't call it my top 1, but definitely deserving for being on the list.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's Tim and Josh and our top 7 lists for our favorite sports movies. So thanks for watching, and hope you will join us next time on Saints on Cinema.